Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks. This week, the NFL meets new challenges to its streaming migration, as does Paramount Skydance with its Warner deal. Fired 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley states his case while Donald Trump stalks out after failing to make his. Apple prepares to talk AI in brand new ways, as does Martin Scorsese, of all people, while Apple also flexes its F1 muscle. And everyone in the video game business is busy dodging Grand Theft Auto 6, like wise business people that they are. Daniel, let's
Yeah.
talk a little NFL football because nothing says world football like the week before World Cup talking about American football.
We're always talking American football. That's
Well,
the,
the biggest thing on American TV, yes,
yeah.
the thing that still makes it viable. All those broadcast operators, so they say.
Well, this week, Jim Jordan is convening a hearing in Washington in Congress about sports' migration, specifically NFL, Major League Baseball,
By,
which we talked about, to
by
streaming.
the way, Jim Jordan, former Ohio State assistant wrestling coach.
Right. They spell his name
So,
G-Y-M.
right.
So,
Well, it was problematic while things were going on, Sandusky like things were going on down the hallway. But that being said, Jim Jordan's been around professional football. He's been at the Ohio State University. So, anyway, going on.
sure. So there's concern in among folks who are beholden to Rupert Murdoch specifically, that sports are leaving the station, the centralized free over-the-air hub that is broadcast television, the center of the town square, and dispersing to the greedy winds of streaming companies. And it's not really true. There's economic free market forces we've discussed in the past that are creating a disruptive transition that is manifest differently from sport to sport, certainly between baseball and football. But it is being
Yeah,
taken
there's
in
no
Washington.
regional sports network, for instance, that was carrying pro football, except the
Right.
the midweek coaches talk show, right? I mean, so none of that, but still different
I
dynamic.
like a lot of things in Washington of a rhetorical cudgel backed up with some actual leverage. They have the antitrust exemption they give to the leagues that allows their owners to negotiate as a group. If they were to lose that, it would affect certainly TV negotiations on the national level. The latest
I'm just
news,
not, but Daniel, I don't want to lose this though, because I am continuing to be
I'm just
fascinated.
trying
If
to
they
round
took
up.
it away, but I'm just saying, if they took it away, would it get better? If they took away the antitrust exemption and let each team negotiate their own rights, say, because that's what you would do if you got rid of the antitrust exemption. It's like, it's fine to beat up the NFL. You want to beat up the NFL, one of the most powerful, untouchable organizations in world sport. But then what? I mean, it doesn't get better for broadcasts, does it?
That might be why Roger Goodell is not even going to show up this week. Nonetheless,
There we go. Now we're getting to the heart of things. That's all I'm saying. It's like, sure, take it away. We'll have a grand old time, and then you'll get to find your frickin' TV games, Good luck with that, broadcasters, because we ain't talking to you ever again.
it might just be performative, and that's just the way that is.
No.
But
Politics is performance?
the news
Shocked.
is that the restaurant lobby, the powerful bar and restaurant lobby, is getting involved. As you may recall, NFL Sunday Ticket, which was licensed to DirecTV for decades, went to a new partner a couple of years ago,
Yep.
Google, YouTube.
YouTube plus live TV. Was it YouTube? YouTube TV. They have so many things that are kind of the same names, but it was their virtual MVPD, left
Right,
DirecTV to go to Google's virtual MVPD, which was seen as a way for them to really stick people in to their subscription services, for
right.
instance.
I'm just trying to catch up here so we can talk about the news a little bit. So it took a couple of years, but after that, the piece of the business, which was the bar and restaurant business, also it was under the management of this company Everpass, and Everpass ended up choosing to go it alone without DirecTV. That was last season, or the end of last season. So DirecTV is now not involved with the Sunday Ticket package either through its commercial or consumer businesses. And with that, they want to remind everybody that a lot of bar and restaurant owners have to do a technological transition. They're not able to just install a satellite dish and use existing Cat5 wire and the setup they've had for X number of years. They have to.
Right.
It's not as easy as just getting a Roku box and attaching it to each TV. It is somewhat involved. I think one bar owner pegged the cost at about $30,000 to upgrade a South Bay, Southern California restaurant bar to a streaming standard. So they're claiming it's.
By the way, I recall when this was all happening a couple of years ago that there were something like 200,000 commercial bars and restaurant subscribers to that.
Right.
I mean, it was a six-figure, low end of six figures, but a lot of bars and restaurants.
Lightshed Partners released data suggesting that consumers actually come out ahead when they stream the games as opposed to buy pay TV. But in the case of the professional market, there's an argument that it is expensive to transition. A lot of these places are national chains. A lot of big purchasing decisions now have to be made. It's a low margin business of like 3% to begin with. They have a powerful, I think it's called the NRA, the National Restaurants Association.
It's the one that's not bankrupt after being used as a piggy bank by its operators, right?
But
that NRA.
It's a pretty powerful lobby. And
right,
you throw that into the mix, and suddenly this performative political exercise may have a little traction. So that's what we wrote about this week. It's a new element to the discussion.
Well, it's another player. Given the dire situation facing so many restaurants and bars these days, I mean, I can't tell you, my spouse and I enjoy a nice meal once in a while, and I pay attention a little bit to the high end of eating, and it has been very difficult for lots and lots of landmark restaurants in Los Angeles, New York, and beyond, for instance, to keep operating post-pandemic. Labor costs are through the roof. Food costs, which, by the way, are really important when you run a restaurant or a bar, are through the roof. They're up like 75% or something like that. They can't raise prices too much. They're pressured in a lot of ways. So it makes sense that if on top of that, you throw in another 30 grand per outpost to upgrade your 1978 satellite TV dish, it becomes the last straw, because that might be the thing that brings people in on Saturdays and Sundays for NFL, true, but also college sports
I know
and all the rest.
An expense, but is it a right? I mean, is it like
it's
oxygen?
Not a right. None of this stuff is a right. I mean, if it's a right, it's like, show me in the Bill of Rights, show me in the Federalist Papers that this is enshrined in our Constitution. It's not. But the point is, it's a set of businesses with influence. And as in this very much, shall we say, an administration that's really about what have you done for me lately in terms of making money mysteriously appear in various places that I care about. It's very much a time where if you got the money, they got the time. They can make something happen for you. And I think that's part of what we're seeing right here.
That is part of what we're seeing right here. Yeah.
I know.
How can we deliver you excellent service is kind of the
right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is it is tough right now for restaurants to keep it going. Lots of chains have closed, like the casual fine dining. A lot of landmark restaurants have closed in the last couple of years. The casual chains, the sort of the middle class, who are the kinds of places that would have these kinds of deals in their bar area, bar/lounge area. Those guys, a lot of those chains have shut down or dramatically closed down their outlets. This is the time of a great deal of pressure on that whole sector. And you throw in more. I get it.
That's what you pay your lobbyists for. Help me out. These guys make things happen.
But that's not going to make it go back to DirecTV. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But meanwhile, there's new opposition cropping up, apparently, for that little $111 billion. It's actually $110.9 billion for now. deal for Paramount Skydance to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. Rob Bonta, the California Attorney General, cruised to first round, an easy win for re-election. He was about 15 points above the second place guy, a Republican. And it's worth pointing out, no Republican has won a statewide office in California in, I think, 20 years now.
Right.
Except Arnold. And Arnold was a special case and not much of a Republican, if you recall. He was kind of Republican, married to a Democrat, a Kennedy at that, Maria Shriver. So it's going to be very tough to see Bonta not cruising to victory in November when the two top places face off. But that being said, Bonta, now armed with that in his back pocket, can go proceed with this joint process of challenging the merger with some other states. And if nothing
Yeah,
else,
actually,
it's going to be really hard to make it to September 30th without the merger being delayed,
he's
right?
been getting pressure from the California legislature for months. And I think
Yeah.
this latest round of CBS News, as it relates to CNN down the road.
Oh, yeah. That only adds to it. I mean, all that stuff going on. On top of that, there was a group at the first of three rallies opposing the merger. This one organized by the Writers Guild at a theater just down the street from their headquarters in Beverly Hills, close to the old Writers Guild theater, actually. They had about 100 people show up to talk about their opposition. They're going to go to two more cities to further talk about this. 100 people turned out doesn't really sound particularly urgent or, oh my God, but it does suggest that there are forces coming together, advocacy groups, concerned people in the industry that will help add to Bonta's pleadings, I guess.
Yeah, as you said, and I think we've been making this point for a while, there's a ticking fee that starts in September that Ellison.
September 30th they have to do it they have to close the deal by September 30th, or every quarter after that's another $650 million, which I know this is hard to believe, is even more than we make from all the fantastic companies that are sponsoring our Stream TV Denver daily newsletter and podcast. It's hard to believe, but it's true.
Yeah, it's more than that.
So you're getting a bargain, beloved sponsors. You're getting a bargain. That's all I'm saying.
You hear a lot of rankling from Hollywood and disparate parts of California progressivism, but what I'd like to see is a very coalesced, organized strategy to really put the Ellisons in a vice and demand something specifically. Okay, you want to divest CNN? Ask for that. Demand it. Why not?
That would seem to be a first in the list of actual. Yeah, because you got to have remedies. It's like it's not enough to just say no. And something like, we are concerned about the impacts, particularly given your track record. Scott Pelley, who noisily stomped his way out of 60 Minutes this last week. Scott Pelley, and we talked about it in our midweek show.
What a champ. Who gets to quit their job that way or get fired?
That is what they call a blaze of glory. I think you've been watching Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, or Thelma and Louise, one of those. It's like pulls out the six shooters and starts going in there just like this. I think that's what happened. But fine. Dude's been working there for 37 years. I remember I was working in Dallas when he was a local anchor at the Dallas CBS station over one of the newspapers there. His square jaw, even squarer than mine.
No, I don't know if you watched or read that New York Times interview he did over the weekend. It was powerful.
No, he's great. He's a very compelling guy, and he certainly laid out lots of reasons to be concerned about the fine job Bari Weiss and her new guy, Nick Bilton, a former New York Times columnist and a documentarian, with neither of whom have any broadcast experience whatsoever, are taking a hatchet to what literally was both one of the most popular and most respected news organizations and news shows.
Grows its audience 9% year over year right now. Right. It's unheard of. And this idea that there were this ossified group that couldn't adapt to the internet. They got 2.5 billion views generated across social and other internet platforms globally last year. Pelley said,
by the way, that's even more than Nick Bilton gets.
Exactly.
Or Bari Weiss. Way more.
Pelley said, I would shoot verticals. It's just a standard part of every segment we do. We shoot
Yeah.
verticals. So this idea that they
Yeah.
were the Luddites, and he describes how Milton came in. You can't. It's not 1968 anymore. What an awful thing to say to a group that you're going in and they've got real misgivings about you. These guys deserved a little respect. Tanya Simon, her father literally invented the place. So you've got these bulls in the china closet, and Pelley does a really good job painting them as that. Not equipped to do this job, no reverence for what they're about to destroy, and certainly no credibility to this argument that they're the ones to modernize it. And
Yeah, they're the change agents. I mean, it's certainly. I saw a piece. I can't remember where it was. It was just they talked to some other top managers of different news organizations, saying when you go in, you got to realize the talent needs to be handled. You've got to start out in a different way than Nick Bilton did, certainly than Barry Weiss did, and saying, "Oh, you guys are Luddite morons, and we're going to show you this whole internet thing. It's going to be big someday. Trust us, and you've got to come along for the ride or hit the highway." Is like, okay, kind of fatuous and empty-headed,
well, it
and
starts with
pretty
contempt.
much it starts with contempt, but it's sort of like anti-handbook for managing humans,
Right.
actual people, in an era of AI or otherwise. So hats off to Barry and Nick for gutting the golden goose to see how this
Well,
works out or
you
what's
wanted
going
to
to be
sort of,
left.
she put her hands on the scales. She had him adjust a story at one point. It doesn't look good. And watching Kristen Welker this morning, NBC's Meet the Press, she had the president on, and she's great. He's trying to feed her the same lines about, of course, the 2020 election was fixed. Several different points of contention where evidence doesn't exist to suggest his point. And she stands up to him every time, up until the point where he walks off and she begs for him to stay. And I like, after a decade of watching this guy storm off and get the last word in, you're horrible people, you're a horrible organization. You know, somebody needs to just say, hey, if you have this evidence, show it to us, or walk away, you coward. Something to that effect that teaches this bully he can't just say anything he wants. It's so unsatisfying to watch him do that. Anyway, it was
Well,
satisfying to watch Pelley.
I don't think you're gonna. I don't think you're gonna get much satisfaction out of that one. But you know, a man can dream. Good luck with that. So anyway, with
Okay.
Pelley, so Pelley stated his case. It's certainly reason for concern. Bonta, it just adds to the push to get Bonta and other states AGs, attorneys general, to somehow cause at least some shifts in some of what's happening with the deal. We still have to hear from the EU, which supposedly will wait in July. And they have always been much more willing to intrude on some of this stuff, given the international ambitions of both Warner Brothers and Paramount, particularly if they're going to make back that $111 billion. The international stuff in Europe and beyond is going to be crucial to
Right.
their long-term success. So what the EU says, not like, oh, screw it. It's like we had like 2 million people over there. It doesn't really matter. We've got America. So
Well, there's
I
a
think
real,
it's going to be a bigger deal.
these things have cooperative element to it. Yes, we have misgivings, but others don't. And we don't want to be the one squeaky wheel that holds up the whole process. Here's a
Mm,
negotiation. Let's compromise on this and move along. That's usually how that works,
mm,
right? And if you have European
typically.
bodies that are militantly opposed to administration and they feel like greenlit a deal that's no good for anybody, you're on unprecedented ground. So a lot of bad things could happen to this. It could turn out pretty cataclysmically. Going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I'm fascinated. Speaking of international things, I did mention the World Cup. It's hard to get excited if you're a American football fan, but if you're
I'm
a world
excited.
football fan, it's pretty cool. The Atlantic, however, wrote a very amusing, if slightly disheartening story called This Absurd World Cup. One of the things they pointed out, and it's impossible not to mention this, in late June in Seattle, in the middle at the back end of Pride Month, there will be a Pride match featuring two World Cup competitors. Those two competitors are Egypt, where it is a crime to be homosexual, with prison sentences up to 3 years, and Iran, where it is a capital crime punishable by death to be homosexual. And they'll be celebrating Pride Month in Seattle, one of the most woke cities probably in the world. So I don't know if this is Gianni Infantino's, the head of FIFA's, sense of humor, or imposing his will on really a wide array of people on both ends of the spectrum. But that's just one wacky little thing to look forward to as we go forward in
They'll probably
the
make
next 6 weeks.
Official FIFA protest that's probably coming next. They're
right. If we see a rainbow of any kind,
just
in rainy Seattle, I'm waiting for those cruise missiles to be shipped from Iran to Saudi Arabia, which is supposed to host the 2034 World Cup, by the way, after becoming a major investor, by the way, in FIFA. How'd that happen? Boy, I don't know. Weird how these things keep happening. And Saudi Arabia, by the way, also a major investor in Paramount-Skydance in its acquisition, along with EU, the UAE, and Qatar. So some of the same names keep popping up over and over.
I thought it was interesting on social. There's an ad list of Middle Eastern countries that are tolerant of LGBTQ. It just has Israel. it's
right.
It's argument. A set of arguments that don't meet very clean geometric standards. So I agree with you. For that match, Seattle, Portland, even Los Angeles seem like strange places. So
yeah, to have, and Iran, by the way, after all the pressure from the Trump administration, and didn't allow, I think 11 of they gave visas to all the Iranian players. It's the 21st ranked team in the world. It's a pretty good team. But not to 11, I think it was, of the support staff, including the guy who heads the whole thing, who, admittedly, an awful human being. Threw a grenade at a busload of Israeli soldiers once and has said a whole lot of other things that are pretty egregious. So, not great. But that being said, they moved from Tucson across the line to Tijuana for their base camp. Here in Southern California, 6 of the countries, of the 48 countries, have their World Cup headquarters somewhere within 100 miles of where we each sit. And of course, the first U.S. game will be down the street from you over in Inglewood at SoFi Stadium. It's a half a dozen of the first round games will be in Los Angeles, and 2 or 3 of the knockout round matches. So it's going to be here a lot. And we'll be hearing a lot, and
we will,
there'll be all kinds of fan zones and stuff as well.
Americans don't, I tried to get to Pasadena to visit some friends last week on Saturday, and I don't know who Mexico was playing at the Rose Bowl.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it's Mexico playing the Rose Bowl. 105,000 people or 101,000.
Among the 105,000 cars we were behind on the 210 freeway were at least 17 pickup trucks with Mexican flags, giant ones, pulled into the back. So it's going to be pretty big in the Los Angeles, Southern California region, no doubt about it. I don't anticipate anything else.
Though the chagrin, I think, of all those fans who went to the Rose Bowl to see that game, all 3 of El Tri's first-round games will actually be in Mexico. 2 of them, 5 miles from their main headquarters at that Estadio Azteca. It's like, again, 105,000, 110,000 seat stadium in the heart of Mexico City in the FA. So if anybody's got a shot to make it to the second round between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, you got to really think the Mexicans are in pretty good shape. Talk about a home field advantage. They got it. So, and some pretty ardent fans. But yes, it'll be hard to miss. And I think they're anticipating something like $13 billion in revenue, most of which will go to FIFA itself. Not nearly enough will go to pay for all the costs of putting on the show. And they've made some accommodations. Apparently, they've gone back and forth on whether you can bring a reusable water bottle into the stadiums, because they don't want you to throw them. It's like, if it's reusable, I kind of want to keep it. If it's not reusable, I totally want to throw it because you guys are awful. I mean, I don't quite understand the reasoning here other than it's another way to shake down ardent and hapless fans who are paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for tickets. A friend of mine who's Belgian lives in Portland, and her family are going to see Belgium play Egypt in Seattle also in a couple of weeks. And she said they went and found tickets that were not quite as expensive as those US ones, but she didn't want to say how much because it was not even Belgium versus Egypt.
Okay, let's
Pretty
move it.
expensive.
Well, we just talked about how this is American, but the NBA Finals, at least the tipped-off version of it on late last week,
The first game.
drew averaged nearly 17 million viewers, which was the best TV audience since LeBron and Steph Curry faced off back in 2018. So
Yeah.
best numbers in 8 years that they hold up over what looks like a 4-game series right now, the way the Knicks are playing. That's an impressive feat. A lot of Knicks fans out there trying to watch the team when it's been 50 years, 53 years since they last.
53, I think 70,
Yeah.
was it 72, I think? Maybe it was Willis Reed in 72, maybe, or it might have been 73. They also won, but it was 72, 73. So it's been a little while. It's been half a century. And yet, Knicks fans are the most unbearable fans on if you balance it out, like Celtics fans are completely unbearable, but at least they've won a bunch, like 17 or 18 titles now. I can't even keep track anymore. I've been them and the Lakers, right? The Knicks haven't won since Richard Nixon was the president.
Yeah, they're owned
And
by
yet their fans are so unbearable. And they, one of the most obnoxious owners in professional sports.
James Dolan, for sure. I agree with you on that. But there are a lot of good.
So he is a better guitar player than most of them. I'll give Dolan that. He's a better guitar player than most, better blues guitarist. So.
And they've suffered and now manifest destiny. They can just not choke over the next 2 games.
At home. The next 2 games. Yeah, I did want to say this could be both the most heavily bet on series in quite a long time, or legally gambled upon, but could cost all the books a lot of money because the Knicks were not odds-on favorites by any way. They were an underdog. If you put money down in the season, they looked terrible for a long time. And there's a lot of money that went in because they're just Knicks fans about them winning it all. And now they've got a real shot to win it. And all these bookmakers, many of whom are ex-New Yorkers who live in Boca Raton or Las Vegas now, are, happy to see them win, but it's going to cost them a lot of money. So kind of amusing.
With tickets going for nosebleeders for, I think, $10,000, you're not going to get much of the rank and file outside of Spike Lee and Timothy Chalamet and, the usual
Tina Fey.
Right. So I guess it's a safe place for a guy like Donald Trump to show up for his first NBA basketball game in several decades, which is the plan, I hear, for Monday night when the series migrates to Madison Square Garden. It's going to be.
It's funny because, yes, it's going to be hell, and it's going to make traffic even worse in New York. The crazy thing is the Trump family is really tall. I hadn't really processed. He's like my height, like 6'3" and shrinking because gravity sucks. But Donald Trump Jr. is 6'5". Donald Trump Jr.'s wife, Laura, is like 6'1". Eric is like 6'4", and Bannon, Melania's brood, is 6'8". They could be a basketball team, not a very good one.
So what's your
Jared Kushner, I think, not that tall. But you'd think that a family that tall would be kind of sort of passingly interested in basketball, but no, not ever.
Power, Dave. Power. For the sake of power.
Well, basketball power counts, but they grew up with the Knicks being terrible for the last half century.
And
so maybe they just didn't get into it. Yeah.
Sex and power.
With Storm. Speaking of other things.
You want to talk about Huawei of
AI?
China?
No, I want to talk about AI.
Okay.
So worrisome news piece number 1. Anthropic, the market leader, has filed paperwork to go public. It'll follow SpaceX into the public realm. Fine. It'll probably be $750 billion valuation or more, possibly closer to $1 trillion. That's a lot of money. But 2, it said, hey, we're getting to the point where these AI models are strong and smart enough that they can do self-improvement. Now, if you're Horatio Alger, that's great. self-improvement, to become better, to reach farther than you could otherwise. All that's
It's
fantastic.
capped
If
at
you're AI,
yeah,
it's not good. It's not good. And they're just saying, hey, maybe we slow down a little bit here. The president has this new executive order saying a 30-day review, but more generally, maybe we just slow down a little bit, which might not be bad. And of course, the competitors are going, oh, you just want to lock in the fact that you're ahead of us for an hour and a half. And, why should we do what you're saying? You guys can wait. We're going to charge right ahead, which is not a recipe for success for the human race.
Cat's out of the bag. Toothpaste is out of the tube, to just mime the cliche.
Feels more like the tiger is out of the bag instead of the cat, but it's a very large, unhappy cat. So we'll see where that goes. Meanwhile,
Even
Marty
if we had
Scorsese,
go ahead.
if we had what?
If we had a competent administration, we couldn't stop this. This is it exists, so somebody will advance it to the point of, where it doesn't make sense anymore.
Right. Well, as the Wall Street Journal put it, AI systems are advancing so rapidly they may soon be able to improve themselves without human intervention in ways that could pose significant societal risks.
Right.
There are those in Hollywood
to the point where Cubans can't turn them off.
or whatever. Yeah, I mean, there are some in Hollywood who believe we're already at the significant societal risks to Hollywood, but got news this week that Martin Scorsese is now using Black Forest Labs text to image and video tools for pre-visualization. He famously, since he was a kid, was storyboarding by hand his films, and now he's using Black Forest Labs stuff to do that previs work because it's so much quicker and easier for him to get exactly what's inside his head onto a page so he can show it to all his collaborators. Now, Gizmodo, which is a tech-focused publication, called this devastating news. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, it's interesting to contrast Marty getting involved in this, the Oscar winner and teen million, award-winning guy,
filmmaker,
with all those great films.
Right.
Filmmaker. Taught my spouse at NYU back a long time ago. I won't tell you when because she'll kill me. But great filmmaker. He and his longtime editor, Thelma Schoonmaker, resisted for years using nonlinear editing, digital editing tools until she finally in 1995 did Casino with him. And that was the first time that years after lots of others in Hollywood did it. This is completely the opposite. And there are people who are just they're flipping out. They're like, oh my God, if Martin Scorsese, 83-year-old Martin Scorsese is using this stuff, the world is ending. So
yeah, we discussed it last week. A lot of older filmmakers, maybe because they're not going to be displaced personally, are pretty comfortable with it. And I think,
it's just a new tool to speed things up. And
it's part of the rules. I think it's in Netflix's guidelines. You can use it for that, right?
Absolutely. Because previs actually allows you to be much more specific about the way you want something to look than shooting it all on green screen with drawings, sending it over to the black box that is visual effects post-production, and hoping to God it all comes out how you want. Now, it's not quite that unmoored, but you have much more specificity when you can do it up front. And previs becomes very specific, and we're shooting this that looks like this, and we're going to go back and forth about this, not something that's sort of this, but it's different than what's in my head. And filmmakers, great filmmakers, George Lucas famously didn't want to, he came out with the redone versions of Star Wars back in the early 2000s. I saw him speak at a time. He said, hey, could you put out the original? So it's kind of fun to see the hand actually taking the Death Star across the screen. He says, no, because this is how I see it in my head. These guys have stuff very specifically in their heads, and now they can attain that. And that's very creative and kind of cool, even as we're worried about slop over everything. So
there used to be the old mime of the filmmaker used to do this, envision life through,
or they'd have the single lens to be able to frame the thing within the lens and stuff like that. They still do that, Feels a little
since we're on
pretentious.
the very broad plane of technology, something that was interesting I read this week. Huawei has been under under federal indictment for 14 years. And
for being Chinese.
Right. Under Trump 1 in 2019, we declared them a national security risk. Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State at the time, said they're not a back door to the Chinese Communist Party. They're a front door. They were being used for espionage. We had a Huawei phone, I think, at one point. They make smartphones, a lot of telecom equipment.
They make a lot of very good smartphones I have been on pretty places with the Apple iPhone in China for number one. I mean, they make very good phones, but Pompeo's point is potentially worthwhile. It's the same thing that led to that ban on
Well,
Chinese-made drones, right?
this is an
They got
inconsequential.
potential backdoors.
Their fate and future they've persisted. They've moved into things like autonomous cars and all sorts of different markets. But one could argue, and folks who visit their Sichuan headquarters, that they are kind of the Chinese equivalent of Apple, kind of an inspired company that
Pretty much.
understands consumer designs and what appeals to people. And the latest iteration of the Justice Department's case, which will finally go to trial in September, at least it's scheduled to, includes no language about them being a national security threat. No language about them being a Trojan horse for Chinese espionage, which leads you to believe that it was all rhetoric and bullshit. The global technology equivalent of slander. Stephen Sanders in Fierce Network wrote about it in an essay this week. It's a compelling read. I encourage you to check it out.
I mean, Huawei has been forced to stick basically to only owning the 1.4 billion people in the Chinese market and its diaspora. It is not, I would say, an illegitimate concern given the meddling and imposition of controls by the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government on all companies in China, particularly those with an export component to what they do. That to believe that something as vital as communications networks and some of the networking software and hardware that they were making might be vulnerable to
Might
inappropriate
be, but
backdoors.
when you don't
And
have
you maybe
evidence
need to you might want to prove that case before you start throwing that stuff around. But I'm just saying that the basis for that is
we've
not
had plenty of time to prove it.
strange. It's the same. It's the same reason that TikTok got sold off in the U.S. Right? They were using it for propaganda, and they had a backdoor right to every young person's mind, every TikTok obsessed young person's mind, and so
Yeah, my
if you can make an
ex
argument for
isn't
one.
overrun by Russian bots. I mean, it's all ridiculous. What else you
Well,
got,
no,
Dave?
Russian bots don't have that kind of reach. Nobody's selling Russian communication software. The Contact, the big Russian social media platform, never made a dent outside of Mother Russia, etc. I did want to talk a little bit. You know how movie studios will pick out a weekend for the next Star Wars, or at least they used to, back when Star Wars could do something. It's going to be the next Backrooms from YouTube creators, but they would pick out a weekend and say, we're coming out, the weekend before Christmas 2027, and we're going to own that weekend. And everybody else would go, oh, okay, we're going to leave that weekend alone because that show is going to own the weekend. Well, now, in the video game business, they're giving up a whole month. This week, Sony's State of Play, which is their big shindig, and they'll showcase all the upcoming games and all the release dates. Kotaku had this little list that's in our newsletter, and nobody's touching November. Not even Call of Duty, the all-time best-selling first-person shooter, which lost its crown this last year to my favorite Battlefield 6, but won for like 24 years in a row, had the biggest sales of any game out there. They're coming out not in November, when they typically mostly do. Sometimes they come out like late October. Now they're like a good 2 weeks before all that. They're
Right.
not messing with Grand Theft Auto 6 for a whole month. It's like, it's your road, GTA 6. Go steal cars or whatever, you know. So that just says
Unprecedented.
something about that business. Yeah, it's really quite something. By the way, my backdrop here, You can tell, looks like it's the Swiss Alps with two ridiculously clad young women as skiers. This was taken mere steps. I mean, literally 15 steps from Venice Beach sand in the Rose Room in Venice as part of a fun event for the country of Switzerland, and a new guidebook that they sponsored with my buddies from Lost Inn, which does travel guides, but is owned by the brothers Skogmo, who used to do Chuka Media, which did all the viral video stuff and sold to the company that owns Reader's Digest and other, quote, trusted media brands. And then they went off and said, we're going to go do travel stuff.
You're starting to break up on me here. Why don't we wind her down?
We'll wind her down. So with that, it was a fun event, though. And in the immortal words of Christopher Walken on Saturday Night Live, they had more cowbell, actual cowbells about the size of your head. So that was pretty amusing. Anyway, this is David Bloom with Next TMT Talks and my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, talking all things technology, media, and telecom. You can please share, subscribe, comment upon our podcast, which you can get free on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can get our newsletter at nexttmt, as in media, tmt.com, nexttmt.com, twice a week in your email box, talking about all kinds of things that are fascinating to us and possibly fascinating to you. With that, thank you so much. Stay warm, avoid the Alps, and you want to go have some really good raclette cheese over boiled potatoes. Fantastic. Fantastic. With that, we are out of here. Thanks, guys.